Hi everyone, my name is Marco Campana, and unfortunately I'm not able to join you at the panel this afternoon at the event, but I did want to give you a quick overview of podcasting, which was the presentation I did today. Hopefully it was useful for those who were there, and for those who weren't, I wanted to give you some of the high-level takeaways. So I'm down here, but the good stuff is kind of up there, so keep paying attention, and we'll go through really quickly what I covered. So essentially with podcasting, we looked at the trends and statistics, some 5 steps to make it work for you, including some information about how I do it, how I podcast, and then a little bit about measuring success and some resources to leave you with. So in terms of trends and statistics, podcasting has been getting more popular and is growing in popularity in Canada. There is an interesting survey called the Canadian Podcast Listener Survey, which has some high-level information. But like any general statistics that are useful for you, you want to kind of take it beyond this in terms of building a strategy. But this is a good place to start if you're not sure of even how popular podcasting might be in Canada right now. A lot of the stats we see about things like podcasting and other tech come out of the States, so this is actually a useful survey, and it's from 2017 to 2018, so it actually has some comparative data which can be useful for you. So for making it strategic and going beyond those basic stats, I've got 5 quick ways to make it work. And the first one is that you've got to be strategic. You've got to prepare a podcasting strategy. Like anything, you have to be strategic. In this day and age, your phone pretty much has everything you need in order to start podcasting, but really you've got to go beyond that. And what hasn't changed is that you need to be strategic like any other communication or marketing approach or content or things like that. So you really want to ask yourself why you're podcasting. And there can be a number of different reasons, ranging from creating connections, raising profile, sharing your stories, a lot of different reasons why you might want to be podcasting. But you want to really think that through and fit it into an overall communication strategy. Your audience is going to be key through all of this. So, for example, is your audience even consuming podcasts? Are they listening to podcasts? Are they interested in you having a podcast? If you were to do a podcast, what would it be about? And is your audience necessarily external? Perhaps you could use a podcast to inform and educate internally with your staff. You might use a podcast to reach a current and existing audience, or you may use it to reach an entirely new audience. It's really important that you go through that process to figure out who your audience is and what you know about it. And if you're a data-driven kind of approach, this is from Tara Hunt, who runs Truly, a strategy agency, and it's really kind of going through the process that you should be going through for any kind of strategic communications or marketing approach, getting data, analyzing the data, learning from it, testing these ideas, figure out your overall strategy, and then kind of moving forward with it. So having a big picture strategy is important. And then next, you want to select your equipment. Now, there's lots of possibilities for podcasting. No matter what, though, you want a good microphone. The audio is obviously essential in a podcast, and you want it to be clear. You want it to come through really cleanly for them to be able to hear it. Now, you can do it on the cheap at the same time. So for me, the way I podcast is I actually use my smartphone. It comes with a built-in app. Most obviously come in with built-in audio apps. I use one step up. It's called Tape-A-Talk Pro on Android, and I have the Rode SC6 Dual TRRS input and headphone output for smartphones, which actually is complicated, but is that little thing you see in the bottom that basically turns your smartphone into a splitter, so you can have 2 microphones and even have an audio jack, so you can listen to the recording as you're doing it. And so for in-person recordings, that's really useful. You can listen as you're doing it, and you get excellent audio through lapel mics. For external or Skype or web-based interviews, I use a microphone, Snowball, this thing right here that I'm actually recording on today. And it's not the most high-end quality mic, but it does the job and it gets the audio through, and I'm really been happy with the audio quality. Now, I also actually record most of my podcasts using phone interviews, and so you can get phone recording apps. I use something called Bold Beast Recorder on my Android, and it allows me to actually record the phone conversations, obviously with the other person's permission. The audio can be quite good when you're doing that. The next is, once you've got your setup, is you want to plan and record each episode. Now, this is really about, depending on how you're doing, if you're interviewing someone, it's really prepping your interviewees. The more you prepare, the easier your post-production will be, and the warmer your interviewees will be and more comfortable. So in my case, I usually send questions ahead of time to give them some time to go through them. You're not doing gotcha journalism here. You want them at their best. And the better they are, the clearer they are, the less you'll have to edit after, which is the next step, editing and producing, and is one of the most time-consuming, but also one of the most important pieces. Again, you want your podcast to be clean, compelling, and easy to listen to. So depending on what you have to do here, sometimes it's modifying the audio levels, but certainly cutting out extraneous bits of information if you're doing an interview, for example, or if you're doing something that's more narrative or more journalistically based, editing is going to be essential. If you're narrating over interviews, if you're doing something with a much higher end kind of production value, then the editing is essential. And because of podcast success, like things like Serial, which most of you probably have heard of, it's kind of the gold standard of podcasting, people do have pretty high expectations around production. But at the very least, they want to be able to hear your podcast. And high production values, at the very least, means having some sort of unique intro for each episode and some sort of call to action or outro at the end of your podcast. And then you want to publish and promote. Just because you've built it doesn't mean people are going to come, and just because your podcast is on iTunes or Google Play or Spotify doesn't mean that necessarily that people are going to be finding it. And so, again, going back to the Canadian podcast listener, one of the things they talk about is that people hear about podcasts word of mouth. Shocking, right? Friends and family, they see them on social media, they read about them on other websites, perhaps on your websites. People are looking for niche kinds of podcasts as well, and the way they're consuming them is starting to change. People are not just, podcasts were originally connected to iPhones or the iPod for obvious reasons, but smart speakers, Android devices are increasingly where people are consuming their podcasts. So you want to be able to put it out there to a broad audience. And then you want to measure your success. It's kind of the last thing that you want to be thinking about. And all of this is really simply goes back to your strategy. Why are you podcasting? Measure based on the why. Measure based on that strategy. Like anything that you're doing, you can get tons of analytics. You can get lots of stats. You can get geographic information. For example, I was looking at my stats today and I discovered I'm huge in Japan. Had no idea. Don't understand why. But that's interesting if I want to do any kind of tailored content down the line. But more importantly is, are you getting what you wanted to get out of podcasting when you started it, right? It's not just about numbers. You're trying to accomplish something. You're trying to have some sort of outcome. So those are my big tips. There are resources on my website and an article that I wrote on the nonprofit marketing community, and I hope this has been useful as a summary.